second body was found in a
Reports
ditch.
from witnesses to the affected people acted as though they were in a kind of trance, were killing and eating their victims.
Parts of the corpse had been removed. The head, or in some cases, the remainder of the corpse left intact. Evidence indicates
hoodlums just caused a great deal of trouble. That's all there is to it. I think that the vast majority of the Negroes are not involved at all. They're a group of gangsters violating the law, and they took advantage of the situation. And
the animal which was set after the two lame men was kicked to death by a young animal-like woman.
Chief, if I were surrounded by 6 or 8 of these things, would I stand a chance with them?
Well, there's no problem. If you had a gun, shoot them in the head. That's a sure way to kill them. If you don't, get yourself a club or a torch. Beat them or burn them. They go up pretty easy.
You've got to get the president on the phone. We've got to get a nuclear weapon in the air above that town.
reliable sources.
But our primary consideration at this point is national security.
This is a way of protecting our country, to keep communism from entering our way of life.
All the citizens are being rounded up. We've got to get them together in a central area.
Just want to get them out of here so they won't do anything to them.
During daylight escape of the two convicted force,
Those people are going to resist.
Another man is dead.
Chris, we're taking you out. We're sending you into the weather.
I've never seen anything as horrible in my whole life.
be a grisly work of art.
You've got to get the president on the phone.
Subsequent investigation has revealed at least a dozen empty crypts.
All right. Get me the president.
North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that.
You know, I guess we didn't realize how much we were sort of turning things on end, but, you know, maybe it was just by shuffling it all together in one big nightmare.
I wanted something savage to happen. I don't believe I could do that now. I don't believe they'd let me do that.
I went from being the kid scared to being the kid who scares.
You wanted to blow other people's minds and you wanted to blow your own.
As Allen Ginsberg said in Howl, I think, you know, it's all that bad karma. You've got to go somewhere.
I think we shoot a lot of stuff, and then 20 years later, we find out what it really meant.
Cinema itself could become a haunted house. The images themselves have something of a quality, not just of a representation, but a zone between reality and representation, which is exactly what ghosts are. Images of people long dead. When cinema was first invented, people received it in the first Lumiere film, say in 1895, by saying, this is immortality. Death will no longer be total. Because we'll have images of people, not just still photographs, but of their movements, of a moment of their life. And so what first seemed to promise immortality ultimately delivers ghosts. What we get is not someone who lives forever, but someone whose image, whose shadow has been caught and forced to repeat the same gestures over and over again, condemned to an eternal repetition. those original kind of strange feelings, uncanny feelings, have been buried under generations of habit and familiarity. But I think the horror film often kind of reignites them, makes them emerge again in a very powerful way.
This is my Lugosi sculpture in progress. Bela.
So these are really the old monsters.
The best. The ones that I thought were real.
In a Far Cry, they seem awfully gentle compared to some of the monsters you've made.
I know. And back then they were terrifying. I used to watch movies like this as a kid, but like this, though, I had to at least peek and get the Frankenstein makeup or something like that, you know.
I was at my cousin's house, and I remember I was under 10, but we were watching The Wolfman. And when it got too scary, like, too scary, too scary, we changed the channel. Where on another channel was Son of Frankenstein. It was Channel 9 and Channel 13. So we changed it and watched Son of Frankenstein until it got too scary. We changed back to The Wolfman.
Frankenstein is still the monster, the makeup.
And of course, they were sympathetic in a way.
That's what Karloff always says. You know, he got letters from children saying how they felt so sorry for the monster, and that's exactly what he wanted. You know?
Frankenstein is basically a murderer that's made up of the dead. So you get the whole thing. You get the ambiance. You get the penetration right into the memory center about death and the ultimate creature, the ultimate monster.
I don't know, but so we were exposed to this. There was some kind of cultural phenomenon, rebirth of monster stuff in the 60s. Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and these models came out, Revell models came out. I mean, there was just this renaissance of interest in the classic horror films. And those kids who got enthusiastic about that are the same kids who grew up to create, you know, the new generation of horror film.
I remember being frightened by the old zombie films, but it was always, you know, the guy out doing the work while Lugosi was up in the castle. But what always intrigued me was, well, you're not going to be able to control them. I mean, you're not going to be able to go get them to take out the garbage for you. What scared me was the idea of somebody dead walking around. The zombie, for me, was always the blue-collar kind of monster, and he was us.
When did that movie come out?
68.
68, so I was 17 when I saw it. And I saw it on like a double feature with some shitty sex picture or something. But I just went, wow, because there was a black guy. He's the lead. Wow, you know, I'm watching this movie, it's just like hitting me from all angles. I was so impressed with it. And I go home and I tell my mom, I say, I saw the greatest movie. I'm telling everybody. I was working as a mailboy at Fox at the time. And I go into the studio and telling everybody, I just saw the greatest goddamn movie. You gotta see this picture, it's so brilliant. And they thought I was nuts, you know.
Oh gosh, it was just torn to shreds. You know, a lot of people talked about, you know, this grainy little film and you know, how far will people go to make a buck kind of thing.
It's when I saw that film that I realized this is really, I've got to see all these films that I never would have thought of seeing before. This is just great filmmaking. I do think that Night of the Living Dead is one of the great American films. Its bleakness, starting from that moment in the cemetery, it's just a heart-stopping film.
Back in the back of the frame, you kind of subliminally notice it, but you don't really think of it as a threat, and then suddenly it is. That's a very frightening and I think beautiful moment.
Living Dead was the first one that just had this reality, this verite, in the way it was presented. It was very real, very gritty.
You know, in those days, the news was in black and white, and black and white was the medium. It was much more realistic then.
Have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. Medical examinations of some of the victims bore out the fact that they had been partially devoured. A Widespread investigation of...
I first saw the film as the featured attraction at my bar mitzvah party. All kinds of, you know, kosher laws being broken there, yeah.
Why is it worse to be killed and eaten than just to be killed?
Like, there are probably a lot of different things, but I think a lot of it does go back to really primal, infantile fears. I mean, actually, a therapist once pointed out to me, said, what do you do when you have this really wonderful baby in front of you? You say, you're so good, I want to eat you. And the parents are always going, you know, nibbling on the fingers. The kid understands that their parents really, on some level, do want to eat them up.
Oh, baby.
The scene where the daughter eating, is it her dad with the trowel? Remember that? I just thought, talk about family values. I love this movie. This movie was so ahead of its time.
Just thought it was great. I thought it was, you know, this idea of you know, a revolution or something devouring, you know, a new society devouring the old completely, and just changing everything.
Well, Chief McClellan, how long do you think it will take you until you get the situation under control?
Well, that's pretty hard to say. We don't know how many of them there are. We know when we find them, we can kill them.
Are they slow-moving, Chief?
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up. No, we're all right.
I mean, you can't not think of lynchings.
No, away in the fire. We don't want it getting up again.
You cannot not think of the kind of freedom marches in the South. You can't not think about the civil rights struggle.
I mean, the greatest thing that ever happened for the advancement of civil rights in this country were those moron Southern sheriffs who, you know, turned the hoses and the dogs on these nonviolent protesters, because the image of those fat cracker, you know, with the roll of fat here and you know, the ferocious dogs, those are real horror images. Those are very real and very horrific images. And that's why the end of Night of the Living Dead with those Yahoo NRA guys, you know, shooting the zombies. Yee-haw! And it's amazing how that's true.
These images tell the truth, the painful truth about those struggles in ways that not many films of the time or since have been able to.
Nick, Tony, Steve, you want to get out in that field and build me a bonfire?
You know, obviously what's happening in the world, I think, you know, creeps into any work. You know, it just fits right in. Because that's where it comes from, or that's where the idea comes from, or you get the idea in the first place.
There's something there. I heard a noise. All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes. Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
That last montage we get over the credits at the end of the film, where we see Ben's body being treated just as a piece of dead flesh, like we've seen walking around in the film. This person that we've cared about all the way through, treated in this heartless manner where the men who are taking his body away are carrying him with hooks. They won't touch him physically with their hands. Devastating. It was devastating to me the first time I saw it. It's devastating to me now. I just really think it's one of the most powerful sequences that we have in the modern horror film and in film, I would say.
Ahead with the motorcycle, please. Let's go, Buster. That's the way. Hey, Randy, light these torches over here. People in the back. Way in the back.
And we finished the film and threw it in the trunk of the car and drove it to New York to see if anybody wanted to buy it. And Russ Strider and I were driving to New York, and that was the night that King was, that we heard driving filmed to New York.
Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died.
And you know, all of a sudden, you really don't know. It shatters your, it certainly shatters your faith in what's going on at the top, and it really gives you a kind of a sense of the the fragility of things, not just your life, but the nation's life.
Just seemed to have no end, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King.
I remember watching that thing live. I couldn't believe what I just saw. What? How, this can't happen in America. We're America.
I think the entire nation was just repeatedly traumatized by the events of that time and still is mystified by what the forces were at work during those times also. There's so many mysteries about all of those murders and assassinations and historical events that just left you feeling completely at the mercy of this drunken fate, that just had blood in its eye year after year.
The bombs in Vietnam exploded home. They destroyed the dream and possibility for a decent America.
Almost everybody knew somebody who was killed or injured in Vietnam. If not your close friend, the person who sat next to you in biology.
I don't know who took this. It's somewhere in the field. That's the way I looked in Vietnam in about 1969. I enlisted in the Army to stay out of Vietnam. I chose the Army Photo School. If you just are drafted, you go to infantry, but I didn't want to do that. I thought if I went to a school, I would have my choice, where to go, but I didn't. As soon as I finished the school, they sent me right to Vietnam. But I did have a makeup kit while I was in Vietnam. I would practice doing scars on people. That's my bunkmate, Tom Curran, here. And it's funny, this is collodion. This is a chemical scar, like here. When I was in basic training, my drill sergeant, Sergeant Lineberger, he knew that I was into makeup, and he saw the scars that I could create. He actually had me send home to get a bottle of this stuff to send to him so he could scar up his face for the next batch of recruits coming in. I don't know how that went, but he wanted to scare them, I guess, real bad. So I'm in Vietnam, the head full of old horror movies. This is after one of the attacks, one of the Viet Cong bodies. Do you know how they would remove these bodies? They would never touch them with their hands. A crew would come in with wire, communication wire. One guy would put wire under the head. They would wait for rigor mortis to set in. One guy would put wire under the head, another guy under the feet, just lift the wires and throw the bodies in the truck. So here I am. I love to be scared. I love to scare people, and I go to a situation, Vietnam, where I am scared, most of the time. But I know that my hands were constantly shaking. My whole body was shaking. Everybody around me, you could see their hands were shaking, especially after an attack, because you didn't know if there was going to be an attack tomorrow or the next day. And it's a potpourri of some of the bunks were empty. Our friends' bunks were empty. They were gone, And that was scary to think, is my bunk going to be empty tomorrow? So anyway, a lot of fear involved in that. And I was always practicing my makeup effects over there. But the gory stuff that I saw, you have to turn off, and I know everybody did this, you have to turn off your emotions when you see this stuff. I had a slight advantage because looking through a camera at this stuff was a separation for me between me and the hideous. There was arms laying on the ground that exploded from grenades off Viet Cong, and I almost stepped on an arm. But to me, through the camera, it was a special effect. And that's one of the pictures I took. I had that picture. And the arm, I bet the arm I almost stepped on was this guy's arm, okay? So that was, a study for me. It was like I was actually able to look at bone and blood and placement and geography, and if I wanted to recreate this. See, don't forget, I just thought of this just now. When I was a kid, watching Frankenstein, the Wolfman, I would go home and try to recreate these guys, you know? So I would really study them, the shape of the brow, where the nose started, you know, what the colors were, you know? So here I was looking at what I was thinking was effects, real gore, and actually studying them and seeing, you know, if I wanted to create that, what would I have to do? Okay, you know, foam latex here and take some chunks out there, some bone marrow. And that's what carries over into my work, I guess, you know. And I think that's what Vietnam did. It gave me the desire, the sense that if it's going to be horrible, I mean, if it's going to be horrible the way I saw it, but they'll never see it the way I saw it, which is out of absolute fear that if somebody walks out of the jungle, he wants to kill you. He has a gun and he's going to try.
Somebody accused me of being almost as subversive as a communist plot to undermine the morals of American youth, you know, by making a film like that.
If what we are now doing in Indochina is right, what is left to be called wrong?
Those kids running down the road just screaming naked after the napalm attack. That was kind of my coming of age to realizing that, you know, Americans weren't always the good guys, and that, you know, things that we could do could be horrendous and evil or dark or impossible to explain. My Lai, for instance, you know.
And we all huddled him up, made him squat down, and Lieutenant Calley came over and said, "You know what to do with him, don't you?"
I feel like I'm a veteran of a war, and I think we all do from that generation, whether you went to the war or not. You know, it was just, it had come home in a very strange way.
You had Kent State, the only time in American history where you have government troops firing on students. It was like, you know, that was really like, Jesus Christ. It was American troops shooting Americans. It was like, what? And for doing what? For doing their constitutional right, protesting the war.
It just seemed to be like there was nothing to be trusted in the establishment and everything to be trusted in yourself and in your generation. So that was kind of the context in which Last House was made.
Sights and sounds far beyond anything you've tested. The Last House on the left. To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Take as much as you can. Only a movie.
The brutality and open sadism of that movie, the first time I saw that really upset me, distressed me. It was very perverted and very, the sadism of the characters. There's this thing where they forced a girl to wet herself before they murder her, you know.
Piss your pants. Piss your pants.
Do it!
Watch your pee.
You do it. Look at that! God. No.
I was struck by that film because, for all its awfulness, it's a very unpleasant film to watch. It's also just got incredible energy and intelligence. I was It's a hard film, but I think it's an interesting one.
You talk to Wes. I mean, I don't know the intention. Last House on the Left. I'm not sure the intention was to be as really profoundly perverted as the film is. You know, I mean, I don't know.
In a way, they're the films of a young man who I think had much more rage than he ever realized.
You do kind of want to say to yourself, well, it's only a movie, right? But it's a moment like this in Last House where I really think it's so painful that you realize, well, you know, what's going on here isn't only a movie. What's going on here has everything to do with things like Kent State, with things like the Vietnam War, that this kind of pain isn't just a kind of a sick, isolated episode. This pain that I'm watching has everything to do with the world that I live in.
You know, that sort of methodical execution style was translated right to the shooting of Mary at the Lake. It's an image I've never gotten out of my mind. I was fascinated by the paradigm that, you know, was in the original Virgin Spring of you have the criminals who rape the girls and, you know, the kind of half-feral shepherds. But then when those shepherds, after the murders, take shelter in the home of these very kind of middle-class parents, and the parents discover who these men are and what they've done, the parents become absolutely ferocious and merciless in their killing of these killers. So I've always been fascinated by that, what can come out of ourselves.
When you're watching a Hitchcock movie and you are in suspense as the direct result of being in the hands of a master craftsman who's manipulating the image in a way to lead you where he wants you to go. And I think that's kind of a comfortable, scary feeling. Whereas in some of the films we're talking about, you know, when you look at a Texas Chainsaw or Last House on the Left or something, and you're watching the movie, the people making the movie are untrustworthy. You're going, well, wait a minute. You know, it's like, oh, we're not supposed to, what the hell? You're watching it, and you're not in the hands of a master. You're in the hands of a maniac.
I was in a shopping, and I was in a Ward's, Montgomery Ward's, or Sears. I think it was Ward's, the hardware department. And the crowd was crushing in. And it was really, I wanted out of there. And I found myself standing right in front of a rack of chainsaws. And just the idea happened. I know how I could get out of here quickly. And something happened within about 30 seconds. It truly seems like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. The skeletal structure for the film and a lot of the texture too just fell in place. About kids, isolation, no gas, you know, straight out of the no gas time.
All right, let's go. No more, let's go.
You know, I think we were really, really afraid, you know, things may really change if we're really out of fuel. I think it was integral to its times, I think in a way that you don't think of now when you see the movie. I mean, you see it, I think it washes over you and it's scary and frightening, and a lot of stuff is working subliminally.
I got no gas.
The horror film, in many ways, even though it may respond to social traumas, I think ultimately hits someplace else. It's almost like the social trauma opens a door, but then you plummet into some of the most primal, you know, elements of, you know, child mother, relationships, sense of one's own bodily integrity, really psychological themes.
My Wisconsin relatives told me about this guy that lived about 20 miles from them, and this was when I was a child, and they would tell me this story over and over about these human skin lampshades, and I think maybe they said something about hearts in the refrigerator, but really the image I came away with, like almost my entire life, was there was someone out there making lampshades out of people. I don't know, they were scaring the hell out of me when I was a kid all the time. But this guy told me this story when I was about 7 or 8 years old about being a pre-med student and skinning a cadaver's face and wearing it to the Halloween party. And this is from the Family Doctor. Something in that time, I think, scared the hell out of me to the point I had to work it out somehow. I mean, I intended for it to wheedle its way in, into the unconscious mind, where the nightmares are. If you get all our little weird things excited, all the stuff that in the darkness, the stuff in the shadows, and in particular, the stuff that we don't open the door on. And when those doors start cracking open a little bit because you're kind of forcing them open with images, images, I think, that really blow right into the nightmare zone. With the elements that were the things that frightened me, basically as a child. And in the right place, too, because it leaves that harmonic, hanging there, buzzing in your head, that's mixed with another little nasty that sits there and quivers, with the other one. And if you can get enough of these things going, and then you slam the door, it takes on a whole different tone.
I mean, I really have such a vivid memory of where we see Leatherface for the first time. We watch the whole thing, and then he slams the door. Thank God this is over. We don't have to watch anymore. But at the same time, this moment also of realizing, I almost want to go beyond that door. And, who is this person in a mask that's, so threatening and so imposing and yet so fascinating? Like, where does he come from? What is his story? What is he doing here? Are we going to see him again?
I mean, I realized right away that I was in a kind of an archetype, that I was in Little Red Riding Hood or something like that. And that seemed to me also incredibly interesting, that you should have a boy audience, and you have the girl as the victim, Red Riding Hood, and no woodsman comes in. She basically saves herself. One of the lessons of these films is don't try to save girls. Girls can save themselves.
The Sally character, the female, continues to escape and somehow run directly back into the spider's nest. You keep going in circles with her. You keep going right back where you started.
Look what your brother did to that dog!
And Sally is trapped there, forced to have dinner with this sick, crazed family. This is a family of people who were slaughterhouse workers. They used to kill animals, but they're put out of business. They're mechanized out of business now, so they're all unemployed, living at home. Always a bad situation.
Yeah, it's probably another one of my fears and terrors, you know. Family get-togethers and...
She's crying, and that several of her torturers kind of go, oh, boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo, and that it is the memory of the worst childhood teasing. You know, when someone's teased you to the point that you start crying, and then mocks your tears. You know, so that, I mean, it also just evokes, I think, really primal childhood memories of helplessness.
The most difficult thing to watch in the movie is the grandfather, and they've put this hammer in his hand, and they're trying to get him to hit the girl on the head, and he's incapable because he's too weak to hit this sobbing, hysterical, terrified woman in the head, and it's brutally funny and really disturbing.
I mean, that man is barely alive. He's ancient. I mean, there's something kind of brilliant, awful and brilliant about having this, you know, ancient old man trying to hit a woman in the head as he did in a slaughterhouse.
You know, and it goes on, and it's like, oh, Jesus, and then they prick her with a pinpoint of blood, and they stick it in his mouth, and he's sucking the blood.
Every adult is a, you know, walking sort of solution and a very individual solution to a very difficult past, that everyone is somehow in the end a walking compromise, and that we do all have in us masochism and sadism and all sorts of unsavory things. The unconscious is not a pretty place. And movies are fantasies, and fantasies are exactly to tap into these things. That's what movies are for. Movies are not to be nice or to be politically correct. Movies are exactly where we go to revisit things that sometimes need revisiting on an unconscious or semi-conscious level. I mean, I just take that to be a given. That's what films are for.
And I always call back on that, I think on those moments, the things that I really know that really terrified the hell out of me. It's like Mothra didn't scare me, Godzilla didn't scare me. It's people that I'm afraid of.
Can a whole country have a nightmare?
I think it's always important to realize that a nightmare you always wake up from, this kind of historical nightmare, may cease, but its effects are there. Now, of course, one of the things that the most frightening films do is to indicate that you can't wake up from a nightmare. That, you know, you wake up and somehow the nightmare has entered into your waking world.
Welcome to Monroeville Mall.
Still dreaming.
Welcome to Monroeville Mall. Welcome to Monroeville Mall. Welcome to Monroeville Mall. Welcome to Monroeville Mall.
That seemed to be where we were then, you know, in the 70s. It was a different, you know, it was a different decade, a different time, beginnings of prosperity, and, you know, the major crises seemed to be over, and everybody was just dancing away, you know. Disco. We were just listening to the Bee Gees, man.
hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
My zombies have already, you know, they've gotten a taste of McDonald's and the good things in life, and just can't figure out why that's not happening anymore. You know, they're just sort of lost souls.
My main, sense of Dawn of the Dead, which is definitely my favorite film of that series, and is the protagonists who kind of seal themselves off in this little world where they can take all the things from the mall and at first seem to feel a kind of paradise,
We're in! Now how the hell are we gonna get back? Who the hell cares? Let's go shopping first!
Those protagonists had this kind of quality of what I felt was rampant in the 70s. Kind of, I can create my own self-satisfying, commodified world and forget about chaos, forget about social injustice.
That's their process of upward mobility, I guess, and then they have this very, they have everything. But, domesticity, is not what it's cracked up to be. And having all this stuff winds up meaning nothing. And, there's always that underlying realization about how synthetic this is. Because I have this, I have that, I have this, and I have that. Without thinking much beyond that.
These creatures are nothing but pure, motorized instinct. We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions. They must be destroyed on sight.
And I got a telegram from George. Hey, we got this gig, Dawn of the Dead. Start thinking of ways to kill people. That was it. That became my job. How do I kill people in unique ways, so. George's intention, if I'm quoting him correctly, was to numb you to the violence, which is what happened to me in Vietnam. You just got numb after a while, After you've seen so many bodies, it's just like another thing,
You're meant to be uncomfortable there, and that puts you in a kind of a mindset to accept the other ideas that are in the film. I think it opens your mind a little more to those ideas, unless you run screaming from the theater.
Still here.
They're after us. They know we're still in here. They're after the place. They don't know why. They just remember. Remember that they want to be in here.
What the hell are they?
Us. We know we're gonna die, right? So we're the living dead.
I can very distinctly remember having that conversation with my mother, saying, well, wait a minute, you mean everybody's gonna die, you're gonna die, everybody's gonna die, so one thinks the unthinkable things and imagines the unimaginable things. And in that way gains some control over them. I mean, that's the trick, you know, is that if you don't think about it, you can't have any control over it whatsoever. If you think about it, you have at least the illusion of control, which is a beginning.
We demand the state provision of all facilities that will improve our lives.
Now, thanks to the spirit of equality in the air and to the work of many of my more foresighted sisters, I no longer accept society's judgment.
You're liberated inside or you're not, you know?
Roger, I had a very disturbing dream last night. In this dream, I found myself making love to a strange man. Only I'm having trouble, you see, because he's old and dying. And he smells bad, and I find him repulsive. But then he tells me that everything is erotic, that everything is sexual. You know what I mean? He tells me that even old flesh is erotic flesh. That disease is the love of two alien kinds of creatures for each other. That even dying is an act of eroticism. That talking is sexual. That breathing is sexual. That even to physically exist is sexual. And I believe him. And we make love beautiful.
Was there a sexual revolution?
Yeah, there really was. I mean, there really was. The 60s were unprecedented in terms of sexual openness and experimentation. And always it was political. That was the other thing. The sex that you were engaging in had strong political overtones. You were always aware that it had political meaning. So sex had meaning beyond sex, you know, beyond the physical then. To me, biology is, of course, destiny. Of course it is. I mean, it's from beginning to end, biology is destiny. But it's a very human thing to want to derail destiny. Therefore, it's a very human thing for us to want to derail biology.
We reject the tyranny of unwanted pregnancy.
And many of my characters are in the process of trying to derail biology in order to derail their destiny as well.
Here, Hobbes believed that man is an animal that thinks too much, an over-rational animal that's lost touch with its body and its instincts. How do you like that? In other words, you know, too much brain and not enough guts. So what he came up with to help our guts along was a parasite that's, a combination of aphrodisiac and venereal disease that will hopefully turn the world into one beautiful, mindless orgy.
I think that right from the beginning, I felt that I would not strain out any of my own ambivalent thoughts about things. That I could deliver to you quite directly my own ambivalence about things. That things might be dangerous and wonderful at the same time. That things might be disgusting and beautiful at the same time. The creatures that infect you are horrific looking, and I'm not saying that I would really want one of them in me. And yet, it's a beautiful thing, but a terrifying thing, and it's because it's liberating energy, and it's opening up potential to things that have been closed up to that point. And I'm playing with all of those contrary notions with that imagery. I, on a very, very basic level, am afraid of revolution. I don't want to have to experience it. And yet I recognize that there are times when those things are absolutely necessary because there's no other way to change things. The parasite is, I mean, metaphorically, it's an idea, you know, it's like Bolshevism, or it's like Islam, or it's like any idea that takes hold and infects people. And it was a kind of a model for the spreading of a philosophy, which could be a religion or a political philosophy, the idea that it was a mouth-to-mouth thing. And so it could be a parasite kiss, you know, it could be a hug, it could be the hug that infects. You don't get society without body, and you don't get body without society. I guess I insist on returning to the body because I feel that so much of human culture is an attempt to flee the body, that we do want to be disembodied, to not acknowledge it, to not deal with it, to not place it at the center of our reality. But I think that it is. So the concepts are there, and it's for me to make it literal, you know. So on the one hand, I'm a fantasist, and on the other hand, I'm a literalist. It pleases me to take something that is a conceptual thing only, and to say, well, what if it's not just conceptual? What if it's physically real? And of course, for me, real is physical. So to incarnate it is to make it as real as it can get.
Shivers has an ending that owns you in a certain way once you see it. This is an ending that owns you, where you are faced with this image where the protagonist, who's done his best to kind of avoid the sexual dementia that the parasites bring on, finally has to succumb.
Metaphorically, I was looking at this the way straight society would look at it. But I think that emotionally and viscerally, the audience was with the liberated, crazy people who were parasite infested. You know, that was the trick of the movie, was that it was a happy ending.
What Cronenberg understands so profoundly is the idea that both the old order that's being replaced and the new order that's replacing it are equally problematic, and that there's not an easy way out of this painful situation. What he's really forcing us to think about is, how is pain an inevitable part of the social experience? We see the kiss in slow motion, where we are able to contemplate it slowly enough where we see both the pain and the relief. And this is what Shivers brings to us in this final moment is, you know, how do I sort out the relief from the anguish, you know? And I think one of the reasons the movie is so haunting is that we can't definitively do that. We have to reside on both sides of the equation.
Is Cronenberg a sexual revolutionary, or is Cronenberg a sexual counter-revolutionary?
I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe revolution really isn't the issue at all. But I think freedom might be. Freedom might well be. That's a different thing.
I didn't mean to put an end to the sexual revolution, and for that I deeply apologize.
he kills these teenagers, and he kills especially the ones who are engage in illicit sex or drink too much. These films have been called puritanical, in an odd way they are.
See anything you like? What's the matter? Can't I get your ghost, Bob?
Horror film's job is to scare you. Is to get your pulse going. Is to scare you, make you scream and yell. It's to make you be afraid. That's its main purpose, and creeping you out. And that becomes an enjoyable experience. Maybe not too scared, the audience says to you. Don't scare me too much. Just a little bit. I kind of like it a little bit.
And the way that movie began, I remember you saw a very voluptuous girl naked. So immediately you went, hello. Ooh, look, very voluptuous girl naked. You got my attention.
We see ourselves holding a knife and stab someone, and we don't know who we are. We don't know who we are.
The pleasure of a horror film is making your way through what is disturbing me here and what am I enjoying about it. And kind of constantly moving back and forth between this is something I need to watch and I need to work out, to why the hell am I watching this, and who am I for being interested in this kind of thing, and maybe this is the person I really am and I didn't think I was, you know.
Michael?
Those audiences are my son, so to speak. Those are the generation of my children. They are the children of mother-headed households. They're the children of mothers who are in the workplace. And they are the children of feminism during that era. The new family of the 60s and 70s was often a divorced family.
I can't remember the exact Latin word, traumata or something like that. The trauma comes from, means piercing, to be pierced. And a trauma is obviously something that you have no defense against, that pierces right through your defense.
And that's why I think that image of slicing at the screen with the knife is so apropos, that it is like, you know, I'm going to break through your protection. I'm going to emerge from the screen.
That was a Funhouse picture. That was like a, you know, ride, roller coaster movie.
It's the old roller coaster idea of why do we go and scare ourselves on a machine?
People do always say that it's just like a roller coaster ride, as if that's an answer to the question. I say, what's a roller coaster ride for?
Modern environment impinges on us, you know, in terms of noise, in terms of visual stimuli, in terms of actual dangers, things like crossing a big city street, constantly. But what we have to do in order to survive is to kind of screen it out, that we create a kind of membrane almost around us that doesn't allow all of it to penetrate. And therefore, if we think of that as kind of like gaining a second skin, you know, or kind of insulation, that we don't feel as intensely. And therefore, there's a desire, in a funny way, in the modern world, for stimulus. So there's this kind of weird push-pull. On the one hand, we get overwhelmed, and so we protect ourselves with this kind of mesh of habit. On the other hand, we get dissatisfied with that protection, and we want it to be pierced.
This test, I think, went very well. I was quite interested in how the troops reacted. I didn't find any soldier there who was afraid. They were all, the ones who hadn't seen a bomb before, were a little apprehensive, but there was no sigh of relief when the thing went off, and no great exuberance which comes from falling being scared.
Every fourth Friday, the last Friday of the month, we heard the air raid sirens, and we did drop drills. We were told, face away from the glass.
My father came up to me and said, look, if you hear the sirens, I want you to go down into this museum building into the basement. And if you see a flash or something, cover yourself up.
And so I started asking my mother and my father, you know, is the world going to come to an end?
Well, if the bomb falls in dead center Manhattan, here's the complete devastation, here's partial devastation, here's radiation poisoning. And we were always in the partial devastation zone, so.
And there was a sense that we weren't going to make it. There was a sense that all of us were going to die in this atomic war.
I didn't know, I didn't know if death was going to fall from the skies at any time.
And I was 5 years old, and in 3D, that thing came out of the screen and blew up in my face, literally right up to here. And I went nuts. I didn't quite know what happened. I was terrified. And I thought, that was scary, but boy, was that cool.
Kids who are in a much more chaotic state of mind and life than most adults remember or realize. They can go into these as kind of boot camps for the psyche, as I have said. Strengthening their egos, strengthening their sense of fortitude. Just as a soldier comes, from mama's arms into the drill instructor's gaze and ends hardened but feeling like he can survive battle, I think that's, in a sense, what goes on with kids who go to scary movies. And that's something that the grown-ups never seem to think about. They're always worried about, the kids have been damaged, the kids have been traumatized. It's always been kind of the basis for my sort of optimism about what I do, of being kind of a right thing, because the kids feel spontaneously grateful for it. Even if it gives them nightmares, there's something going on there that is needed.
Films like Night of the Living Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Shivers, Last House on the Left, all those films tell us over and over again, the apocalypse isn't now. The apocalypse is always and ongoing. And there's no easy way to go back to before the apocalypse, and there's no easy way to imagine a time after it. There's only this moment-to-moment struggle that we all are obligated to engage in.
Harlan, where's it coming from?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
can't say that anymore because we're the future.
The idea that the world would fall back into some kind of order seemed incredibly unlikely in about 1968, 1969. And yet by 1976, 1977, everything was as it used to be in a way.
It was an incredible feeling of freedom and kind of reinventing the fabric of America, you know, from the generation up.
They're like these little nanosecond moments that offered a new vision of freedom, a new way of looking at things. And I think there was a lot of hope, too. I think there was a lot of hope.
It was incredibly exciting. I mean, you woke up every day knowing that some fantastic thing was going to be happening around the world that was connecting directly to you and to somehow the evolution of human culture and so on.
It was a great time, in one sense, because people were rejecting the dogma of the 50s. They were rejecting it. They're saying there's got to be a better way. And now all those people my age and now all sold out, all they want to do is make money. Oh, it's great, isn't it?
I think there is something about the American dream, the sort of Disney-esque dream, if you will, of the beautifully trimmed front lawn and the white picket fence and mom and dad and happy children, God-fearing and you know, doing good whenever they can. That sort of expectation and the flip side of it, of the kind of anger and sense of outrage that comes from discovering that that's not the truth of the matter. I think that gives American horror films, in some ways, kind of an additional rage.